I probably shouldn't have worn this one. Oh well.
Hello and welcome to a live stream edition of the Cyclone Insider
And it is live.
podcast. I'm Travis Hines. He's Randy Peterson, who is second guessing his hoodie selection, but that's all right. Here we are doing this live stream talking about Iowa State, Ohio, Saturday, 11 a.m. ESPNU in Athens, Ohio. Randy, let's jump right on in. I mean, this is a game that really we've been talking about all summer long because it stands out so much with a road game to a MAC team. And man, you lose to Iowa last weekend and don't look particularly great offensively doing it. And now you head into this game and man, like it kind of feels like all downside for Iowa State, short of putting 56 points on the board and getting that defense doing what it normally does. Anything short of that, and it's like the ceiling is kind of a meh. And the downside is you come home 1-2 and the sky is falling. So to start this on an upswing and an up note, like we're real optimistic.
And I'll follow right along with you. You come home 1-2, and I defy you to find 5 more games that Iowa State can win. If you've lost to a MAC team, let me back up. If you've lost to this Ohio team, which we've heard is good, but I'm not certain it's as good as it's been. If you lose on Saturday, then you got find 5 Big 12 victories, and I don't know whether they're out there. I mean, because obviously Campbell said it this year. I think I asked the question, what are the goals for this team? And he finally got around to saying getting to a bowl game publicly. Yeah. So I don't know whether they can get to 5. So that's why this game is huge. Now, do I think they're going to lose? No, I don't think they're going to lose, but I wouldn't put anything past this team. But it's certainly one of the most significant games that Campbell has coached at Iowa State in a while, and it's going to set the tone one way or the other. It could set the tone one way or the other for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you lose this game, you're not talking about finding 5 more wins. You're talking about like staving off catastrophe for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And again, like to go back to the original like frame of the conversation, I do think Iowa State is likely to win this game. But when you go play at a MAC school, like this is the position you put yourself in where the risk reward is so out of whack, where the reward is relatively minuscule and the reward or the risk is huge. And, you know, talking to Jamie Pollard this summer about this game, you know, he made it sound as though it was a financial imperative to Iowa State to play these games on the road when you have Iowa at home every 4 years or 5 years. I'm trying to think the last time they did it would have been Akron and 17 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't have a memory for that one.
But yeah, but that essentially you're not having to pay for anyone to come into Jack Trice, another $1 million or whatever it would be. And I don't even think that they had to pay Ohio. I would have to go back and look at the contract originally, but they get a break on Ohio coming to Ames as well. So it's not a 1-for-1. It's more like a 2.5-to-1, I believe is how the finances work out. And, you know, the finances are what the finances are. If Iowa State feels like this is what they need to do financially, they need to do it. But the problem, or not the problem, the other side to that is you're potentially putting your football team in a really tough spot. And they're in a tough spot right now. Like that's the matter of fact truth, is that this football team is in a rough spot and would be in a much better spot, at least perception wise, if they were playing a MAC team at home. But instead they got to hit the road, and not an easy road trip either. I think, you know, they're staying 90 minutes away from the game. So there got to be a lot of logistics involved here. But on the football side, and we got to start with the offense, right? Like that, how the offense performed Saturday in a victory is going to be almost as important as the final score, at least in terms of a fan base psyche and satisfaction level. If they go out and they win this game 10-3, I think people are going to be ornery as hell and not as upset as if they would have lost 35-32, but people are going to not be happy if this offense can't put points on the board against a MAC defense. And the MAC defense has had success through 3 games, but a MAC defense nonetheless.
I agree. It is a MAC defense, and that's not had success. And yes, I agree that Iowa State should be able to do something, but we haven't seen Iowa State do anything offensively yet. Let's just start with a passing game. Rocco Becht has not been sacked this year. Rocco Becht, I don't remember even Rocco Becht running around for his life in the backfield this year. So, I mean, the line clearly is blocking better for the pass than it is the rush at this point in the year. But with that being said, I don't even know they've tried any shots downfield. Maybe they have a couple, but certainly they've not completed them. And I think Iowa State's got to start doing that. I mean, I thought that Iowa State would do that. I thought Iowa State would do that with Jalen Noel. And yeah, okay, he had a couple drops last week. That's going to happen sometimes. But you've got to take those shots, I think. I'll never forget when Brock Purdy came in against Oklahoma State in 2018. He was taking shots down the field constantly throughout that game. And yes, he was throwing to Hakeem Butler, which is huge. But Iowa State's not taking a shot this year. The longest pass completion of a true pass completion is the last play of last Saturday's game, the 16-yard touchdown to Jaden Higgins. Yeah, okay. Ben Bramer had a 36-yard touchdown run, but that was short pass, longer run, if I recall it right. So that wasn't exactly what I call a shot down the field. I think Iowa State's got to take some shots to at least show you can do it and maybe open up the running game that has gone nowhere this year. There have been maybe a couple nice runs, but for the most part, it's been Groundhog Day. It's been what we've seen, what we saw last year is essentially nothing. And that's I want to see Cartavius. I want to see him get. Good golly, is this going out on a limb to say I want to see him get 100 yards? I would think that Abu Sama would get more carries, and he's averaging 7. I would think he would get more carries because he's been decent. Why not get as one of the top 2 or 3 fastest guys on the team? Why not get him some yards around the end, around the edges? Maybe they're saving it for the Big 12, but why not try to get him some yards around the edges? It's not a mystery to me because we've seen it, but I expected Iowa State to at least show some stuff on offense, and they haven't yet. And yes, I know that Iowa State played against Iowa, has already played the best defense it's going to play against this year. So now go out and hang 30 points on a MAC team.
Yeah, and I think in terms of stretching the field, I'll go back to I think what we talked about after Saturday's game, Randy. We're essentially on coordinator number 3 for Iowa State under Matt Campbell. Tom Manning, unnamed coordinator, although I think we found out who was calling plays.
We know who did that. Yeah.
Will Gordon, I think, was calling plays the year Manning was gone. Manning comes back. Now Nate Shieldhouse. And the deep ball has never really been a staple of this Iowa State offense. The one I can remember against Iowa last week, Beck threw it into double coverage, overthrew it into double coverage, and then I believe the next drive is when he threw the pick 6. So, is that on the wide receiver for not getting open? Is that on the quarterback for throwing it into double coverage? Or is that in the offensive coordinator for not designing or calling a play to get somebody open down the field? I don't have an answer to that other than it would seem the design of the offense is not built with the deep ball at its core. The core is, to your point, running the damn football. And when you've got NFL draft picks in the backfield, that's usually a pretty good answer. Does Iowa State have an NFL draft pick in the backfield this year? I don't know. But what I do know is they average 2.8 yards per carry against Iowa, and that is going to get them beat more often than not.
I'm going to annoy you now, Travis. I'm going to read the comment here. Read a comment. Luke writes, says, our running backs dance too much in the backfield. I can see that. I get that, but I don't know. I've never done it before, so I don't know what it's like getting the handoff and then you're seeing 300-pound guys trying trying to rip your head off. I don't know what that's like, but I've seen Cartavius run right at people. I've seen Sama actually run right at people at well. So maybe they are, but I think that goes back to the fact that the offensive line is doing a better job blocking, at least right now, for pass blocking than run blocking. And I don't know exactly if it's always the case, but it certainly seems to be the case this year. Let me throw one more at you. Rob wonders, what about the violence from the offensive line? I don't know. We hear about that's what Ryan Clanton wanted to do. He wanted the offensive line to play mean. He wanted them to play with violence. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know whether they've been violent or not. I think they've held their own. I think they've held their own. I mean, you can tell. I can pretty much tell that by the pass defense. So I think they've improved in that respect. But as far as playing violent and mean, I don't know. Who knows? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they did not win the battle against Iowa
right
up front in the run game. You know, I think obviously they did a nice job keeping Rocco clean in the pass game, but they did not win that battle up front to create rushing yards. And I think, the running game's got to be front and center when you're talking about this offense. And I think it's okay to be. I think it's appropriate to be concerned if you're an Iowa State fan about where that rush game is. I don't think it's worth going all the way to full panic mode for a couple of reasons. One, that Iowa defense, I think, will turn out to be pretty dang good.
Right.
And two, if one of those top two running backs that we've seen, Cartavius Norton and Abu Sama, are going, I think they both, the way that they're talked about by a staff that knows running backs and the brief glimpses we've seen from both of them, I think both of them have real high potential, real high ceilings. And if you think back to the last two guys that have had that for Iowa State, David Montgomery and Breece Hall, you know, it took 4, 5, 6 weeks into their freshman years before that became apparent that these could be the dudes. And I think Sama's now played 2 games. I almost restart the clock for Cartavius Norton, given the fact that he was so, available last year with injury, that I almost think you reset the clock there for him and start, but this is essentially game 2 for him this last week, at least to have some continuity going into, carrying the football. So I do think like those 2 guys being special and being special this year is still on the table. Now they got to get going. And I would think Saturday would be an opportunity for them to show like what the difference between a high level Big 12 back is and an FAU back or an LIU back that Ohio the last 2 weeks and San Diego State in week 1. So I do think there is reason. I don't know about optimism. I don't think I've seen anything that makes me optimistic about this running game for Iowa State, but I do think there are things to draw a very small distinction to be hopeful, because I do think one of those 2 guys still has serious high upside potential. And I think you got to give Clanton and that offensive line a little bit more time against other defenses to really start judging where that offensive line is in terms of the rest of the Big 12 and in terms of what we've seen historically from Iowa State, which has not been very good, both in the pass protection and the run game.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said, but are fans going to be as patient if this team doesn't win 5 games? If this team doesn't get to a bowl game? Yes, Iowa State has players coming. We know that. But it's about now. And
what makes you say that? I disagree with that. I'm not saying that there aren't people that are about now. I think it would be a mistake if you're an Iowa State fan to be completely about now. I mean, you got to win football games, but
yes, that's my point.
You look at the talent on the field here, and I do think there's a lot of young talent. You look at the guys that are playing right now that are young, and I do think that they have a chance to be really, really good. I don't think they've got a chance to be really, really good this year as a team. I think 6 games is going to be a stretch. We'll see. But I think, and again, what are we talking about in terms of being impatient? Like, Campbell ain't getting fired. Like, they're not going to be major overhaul. Like, we're not even going to be talking. anything short of going like 1-11, like we're not talking about Campbell even really being on the hot seat next year. Like they go 2-10, and we're talking about people getting antsy and Hines, not about Campbell getting fired. And like that's just not anywhere on the radar and nor should it be, given what they've done. And again, what it looks like they can do with a pretty talented roster. I just don't think. I think it's okay to want, like, obviously you want wins, and everyone needs to be held accountable for playing winning football. But, this ain't 2021 where winning was the only thing that mattered. I think there's two tracks here. There's win as many football games as you can in 2023, and then evaluating where that roster is and where you can project it to in a year or two. Because the same thing about Campbell not getting fired in the next year or two, or however many years you want to extrapolate that out, it seems pretty hard to envision him taking another job in the next year or two, given the 7-6 record in 2021, the 4-8 record this last year, and that what I think is probably like a team that's going to struggle to get to 500 this season. So again, like nobody's going to become banging down his door, so he's going to be able to see this through for another year or two of what I think is going to be a pretty talented roster if they can keep it all together, which, as Campbell noted yesterday or Tuesday, whatever day that was, they've been pretty good about retaining players. Like they've had some notable losses, but overall they've been really good about keeping to get teams together. And I think if you look at this roster and you look at the recruiting, I do see the horizon up ahead. How far away it is, how bright it'll be, we'll see. But I don't look at this as like in the pit of despair for an Iowa State program, even if this year is a struggle to win a lot of games.
My point is that if Iowa State wins 4 games, or if Iowa State, let's just say Iowa State wins 4 games, if they match last year's overall win total, that's going to be a disappointing season. To me at least, that's going to be a disappointment. If they win 5 games, that may be a disappointment, but at least Iowa State can go back and say, well, we played better. We won more games than last year, which is true. But the way and in no way, and I emphasize what you said about Campbell and a hot seat or whatever they call it. There's no way he's not on a hot seat, and regardless what happens this year. But I think it's important for this team, and here we're talking like the season's over, but to have a better season than last year for momentum going into the future, which is a very bright future. And I'm not saying that it's all doom and gloom either. Don't get me wrong. I still think Iowa State can get the 5. I still think Iowa State can play the last couple games and have a bowl game on the line. That's obviously assuming a victory on Saturday, which I really think it's gonna happen. But I think it's going to be a disappointment if Iowa State doesn't at least match last year's victory total. But we'll see. And maybe that's just the bar that I was used to with Iowa State, was a bowl game. And then boom, 1-8 in the Big 12 conference. And this Big 12 conference, I think this year is decent. Also, I thought Cincinnati was going to finish 13th or 14th. They're pretty good, I think, for example. So we'll see. That's why Saturday is so significant.
Yeah, you hate to see a must-win game in September, but when you only play 12 of them, they get important in a hurry. And again, like that, just to underscore the original point, is there is a lot riding on this game. And again, I think a big part of the puzzle here that we probably didn't address in terms of where the program sits, throughout and at the end of this year, again, I think will be very dependent on what that offense does. Mm-hmm. Because if they made the changes they made, you install the young, incredibly well-regarded assistant and offensive coordinator. If that offense does not start to show some dynamism, doesn't start to look dynamic, that is going to really frustrate people and the fan base. I'm sure people within the program. I'm not even saying that they need to go out and, past the Brian Ferentz 25 points a game threshold. But I think they gotta show some stuff that isn't totally dependent on Breece Hall or Brock Purdy getting it done for them, because like those guys are hard to find, as NFL teams are learning now. So I think the offense showing improvement, and I think frankly drastic improvement, not from where it was last week, but from where it was last year, is going to be huge in terms of how people feel about this program throughout the year and at the end of the year. But again, we're talking some big picture stuff here. Let's zoom back in to Saturday. And I get the impression like it's still going to be Rocco Beck's offense going forward. I don't think anybody's concerned about the defense. If anything, I think that defense has been outperforming expectations, which were already pretty high. So again, like that's part of the problem for the offense too, is the defense is so damn consistently great that there's not a lot to talk about there in terms of what do you need to improve on. All of that rests on the offensive side, and they just got to start putting the ball in the end zone with more consistency. Otherwise, you're looking at that defense carrying so much of the weight where you wonder how long until their back breaks.
And you mentioned Rocco. Is this a game where if things aren't going well early in the game and and Rocco is struggling, is this where JJ gets that shot?
I mean, maybe. I mean, like, number one, I don't think Rocco Beck's been the problem.
No, not at all.
It's not like there have been times
where it's got to stop somewhere, though. That buck's got to stop somewhere.
There's no easier and more obvious way to shake things up offensively than to switch quarterback. So, but I like to have this conversation. I want to say I don't think Rocco Beck is the problem with Iowa State's offense. I think he's actually been pretty good. Obviously, that pick six last week was a killer. But I think when you look at the 120 minutes of football that they've played, like he's been fine. He's been, maybe a little bit better than what you would think for a guy making his first two starts. To echo Nate Shieldhouse's point from last week, it's not like he had 3 interceptions and 85 yards or whatever it was Shieldhouse had as a first-time starter a decade ago. But I think this would be an obvious situation where you could go to a backup if you get midway through the second quarter, early in the third quarter, and the offense just isn't firing. But why I'm not quick to say I think that will happen are 2 reasons. One, we saw Hunter Deckers throw 14 interceptions last year and never get replaced by Rocco Beck. And 2, Rocco throws that pick 6 last weekend after the offense had mostly sputtered. The first drive was pretty good, but then it sputtered. He throws the pick 6. That was an obvious time to make a change, or maybe not even make a change, but just, Campbell's got covered because he played both of them the first week. He could go back to switching them after that pick 6 and say, no, it wasn't because of the pick 6. It was blah, 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 blah. He didn't do that. So that was a pretty big indication of Rocco Beck as our guy. And now a week later has the frustration, or if they go out and struggle on Saturday, has the lack of productivity raised another notch where then maybe you do make that change if you're Campbell? I don't know. And again, maybe all of this is moot. They go out and score in their first 5 possessions and, all is well in Cyclone Nation. I don't anticipate that, but, we've seen this offense explode for big days before.
Right. And how do we know that, we didn't get a chance to talk to Jalen Noel. How do we know that he doesn't have just absolute fire in his eyes for dropping passes? How do we know that Rocco doesn't come out with absolute fire in his eyes for overthrowing some passes, for throwing the pick 6? And we don't know what goes on behind closed doors during practice either. They could have been having the best practices they've had all week, and we don't know it. But it would not shock me. And let me back up. I agree with you, Travis. This has not been a Rocco Beck problem. This has not been a Rocco Beck problem at all. But we both know, like we said, that's where it starts and finishes, though. I think for JJ Cole to be in the game on Saturday, it's going to have to be a pretty big fall because a pretty big some bad stuff going on, because Campbell wants to get, just like Campbell wants to get JJ involved in some reps, dude. Rocco's not had a ton of reps either. I mean, he's played 2 games essentially, and is that enough? Or 3 games after Saturday? Is that enough to go into the next 9 games against Big 12 competition? This includes the likes of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, for example. Man, this is going to be BYU's better. It's got a great defense. This is going to be tough. So I think Rocco needs to get as many snaps as possible. But if stuff starts going south, it'll be curious to see how they handle that situation. But I echo your point that this is not a Rocco Becht situation. This is a team situation that hopefully they get fixed. And like I said, maybe Jalen Knowles ready to break out, and I don't, if he'd have caught those passes last week, I don't know if they certainly weren't game changers, but maybe he's like I said, maybe he's playing with fire right now. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also probably worth noting that the whole like Rocco Becht and Nate Scheelhaase, probably to a greater degree, are paying for the sins of last year. Yep. In terms of how we talk about and think about this offense. It's not their fault what the offense did last year, but everybody's talking about this offense hasn't done, squat since that group left in 2021. Like, those guys are bearing the brunt of that right now in terms of how people talk and think about this offense, even though it's obviously they're not responsible for what went on last year. I do think that Iowa State goes in on Saturday and wins. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see how they perform. Like I said, if they go out and they win 10-3, 13-6, something like that, or the offense does not look like dynamic, I don't think there's going to be a lot of good vibes heading into Big 12 play, but you'd rather have a win and bad vibes than a loss and horrible vibes. So again, it's just a critical game. And I think the most critical component will be macro, how the offense looks, but maybe, drill down a little bit more. What does that running game look like? Because I have a hard time picturing this offense having a lot of success if a successful running game is not part of the recipe.
And that was the whole situation last year. I mean, everybody knew that Iowa State, and here we are going back comparing last year, but I hope they don't fall into that this year, that Iowa State was so bad in the running game that every play was a pass, and Hunter Dekkers was getting, everybody knew what was coming. I want to see some diversity. I want to see diversity, meaning that I want to see the offense, them do something to open up some of those rushes. I want to see a 100-yard rusher for the first time since the second game last year, when Jirel had 100 yards rushing exactly against Iowa in the second game of the year last year. That's how long it's been. That's for all those games, the rest of those games, the opponents have been able to sit back and defend the pass essentially. So, I think this will happen. I just have a hunch that we're going to see a better offense, a better running game than we have. I mean, I think they're going to pound the heck out of the ball. They're going to try to do that because we see that all the time. But I think they're going to try to do that even more this time because they want something's got to cut loose, and maybe it's just a couple long runs here and there, and then that's the confidence that this team will need. But yeah, I think I'm with you on this one, Trav. It starts with the running game. Everything on offense starts with the running game, and then it goes from there.
He's Randy Peterson. I'm Travis Hines. This has been the Cyclone Insider live stream and podcast. Be sure to check out DesMoinesRegister.com today, tomorrow, Saturday, and every day of the week, frankly, for all the Iowa State football coverage you could hope for. A couple of weeks away from basketball season for the men and women getting underway as well. So we will have plenty of Iowa State coverage for you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll